For years, she was the invisible wife, the one who folded his shirts, quietly paid every bill, and built a life from nothing with her bare hands. She was there, silent, steady, and he believed her silence would last forever. So he confidently took his mistress aboard a luxurious yacht. Their laughter echoed under the lights and the wine, as if betrayal could remain forever hidden in the dark. But then, the stage curtains parted. The ballroom fell utterly still. Glasses of wine froze mid-air, because the person stepping out in the captain's uniform was her, the wife he had once dismissed, the woman he thought would always stay in the background. And in that moment, the man who believed he ruled the world finally realized it was her, not him, who held the fate of his life in her hands. If you've ever felt underestimated, stay with me to see where this woman's story goes next. Richard Coleman stood in his Houston office, 30 stories above the restless streets. The glass walls reflected back a polished image, a tailored suit, a gold watch, hair trimmed with precision. To the world, he was success carved in steel and glass. The hum of phones, assistants rushing, contracts waiting, everything whispered power. Yet, when Richard leaned closer to the window, the reflection changed. The man looking back at him carried shadows in his eyes. His jaw was strong, but there was no warmth. The city lights glittered beneath him like scattered diamonds, but they felt cold, unreachable. He thought about how far he had climbed, from the smell of diesel and salt at the harbor to this high-rise throne. Every detail around him screamed achievement, but inside there was only stillness. He had money, yes. He had reputation. He had everything he once dreamed of, and yet the silence in that room pressed against his chest. Success had given him walls of glass, but those walls now felt like a cage. He loosened his tie, but the knot in his stomach did not release. Richard Coleman looked powerful. Inside, he felt hollow. The hum of the city faded as Richard closed his eyes. His mind traveled back, not to Houston, but to New Orleans. He remembered the harbor where gulls screamed and the air smelled of fish. A boy with tired hands had once carried crates beside his father, back bent, sweat dripping into the salt water. That boy had dreamed of escape. He wanted to climb higher, to live beyond the docks, to wear clean suits instead of oil-stained shirts. And for years, Richard had chased that dream with a hunger that never slowed. He told himself that wealth would heal every wound of the past. Now, standing at the top, he felt strangely untethered. He had built towers from ambition, but inside those towers was silence. His father's rough laugh, the harbor songs, gone. His wife's patient smile, her soft humming when she folded his clothes, fading too. Richard pressed his palm against the cool glass as if searching for something on the other side. The boy from New Orleans had reached the peak, but the man staring back at him through the reflection no longer knew what he wanted. Success had come, and yet it tasted of emptiness. The phone on his desk lit up, buzzing against the wood. Richard already knew who it was. Jessica Moore. The photo on the screen showed her sunlit face, bronzed skin, lips curved in a teasing smile. He swiped quickly. "You're late," she said, her voice playful. "I'm working," Richard answered, though his tone softened without meaning to. "You're staring out that window again. Bored out of your mind, aren't you?" Richard gave a dry laugh. He did not deny it. Jessica's laughter rang like champagne bubbles. "Then let me fix that. I found something. A cruise, Caribbean. 10 days, no phones, no responsibilities. Just us." He leaned back, closing his eyes. He could almost hear the music on the deck, feel the ocean air, taste the wine. But then another thought flickered. Angela, at home, folding laundry, keeping his world together while he drifted further away. "You deserve fire," Jessica whispered. "Not the same dull routine." The silence stretched. His heart beat harder. He should have said no. He should have reminded her he was married. Instead, he whispered 2 words that sealed everything. "Book it." Far from Houston's glass towers, Angela Coleman moved quietly through their modest house. She folded warm shirts fresh from the dryer, stacking them neatly, her motions steady. Each crease pressed into the fabric carried years of habit, years of care. On the counter, her phone buzzed. A message glowed on the screen. "Congratulations again, Captain Coleman. We are proud of you." Her lips curved faintly. Few people knew. Between the bills, the meals, and the silence of Richard's late nights, Angela had built a different life in secret. She opened a drawer and slid out a leather folder. Inside lay her maritime license, embossed letters shining under the lamp. She traced them slowly, remembering long nights spent with textbooks while Richard slept. Navigation charts, safety drills, endless hours of training. Her fingers trembled, not with fear, but with resolve. Angela had carried the home, carried his burdens, and carried her own dreams in silence. Richard thought she was only the woman who folded his shirts. He would never guess she had learned to command ships, to lead crews, to master oceans. She closed the folder gently. One day, the truth would not need hiding. Late at night, when the house was silent, Angela studied. The lamp on the kitchen table burned softly while Richard slept upstairs. Books on navigation spread across the wood, pages covered with charts and notes. Her eyes ached, but she refused to stop. She remembered her father's voice, rough, steady, carrying the smell of salt and diesel. "If you want respect, Angela, take the wheel. Ships listen to no one but their captain." Those words had carried her through the years. When bills stacked high, when loneliness pressed on her chest, when she felt invisible in her own marriage. She clung to the thought that one day she would stand tall, commanding not just a household, but an entire vessel. Every exam passed, every drill completed, every late night spent tracing coordinates built a quiet strength inside her. Richard never knew. He thought she belonged only to the shadows of domestic life. Angela closed her eyes now and let the memory settle. Her father had been right. Respect was not given. It was claimed. In Miami, Jessica Moore sipped iced coffee in her penthouse. The morning sun spilled across glass walls, glittering off scattered designer shoes. She scrolled through Instagram, her thumb pausing on photos of ballrooms, blue seas, glittering decks. Her smile widened. This cruise would be her stage. 10 days of perfection. 10 days of selfies and captions that would show the world she had arrived. She tossed clothes onto the bed. Red silk, diamonds, heels that caught the light. Everything had to shine. Jessica posed in the mirror, twisting her hair, practicing smiles. She thought of Richard and the wallet he carried like a shield. To her, he was not a husband bound by vows. He was proof she could climb higher, faster, without ever lifting more than a phone. She slid into the red dress and turned sideways, checking the angle. Perfect. She imagined herself standing on deck, champagne in hand, while strangers scrolled and envied. The trip was more than a vacation. It was a performance, and Jessica was ready to be adored. Miami's harbor buzzed with life. Brass music filled the air as families hugged, children tugged at suitcases, and porters rushed with luggage. The massive cruise liner loomed above them, white and gleaming, its decks stretching like a floating city. Richard followed Jessica through the crowd, carrying her designer bags. Sweat gathered at his temples under the Florida sun. Jessica laughed, pausing for selfies with the ship behind her. "Smile," she ordered, holding her phone high. Richard forced a grin, but his eyes flickered nervously across the faces around him. He feared recognition, feared the shadow of his wife even here. Yet Jessica twirled, unconcerned, her red dress catching every glance. Above them, unseen, Angela had already boarded, her uniform crisp, her badge polished. She moved through quiet corridors, unseen by passengers, acknowledged only by the respectful nods of crew members. From her vantage point, she looked down at the dock. She saw Richard's familiar figure, weighed down by bags, by lies. Next to him, Jessica's brightness felt like fire against her vision. Angela's jaw tightened, but her face remained calm. Angela stood in her private cabin, hands resting on the frame of the window. Through the glass, the harbor swarmed with voices and music. Her eyes searched until they found him. Richard. Tall, confident to the world, but nervous in the details. His shoulders hunched under Jessica's bags. His eyes darted too often as though guilt itself had a weight. Angela's gaze lingered. She remembered folding his shirts, steadying his collar before his first big meeting, whispering that he would not fail. She remembered carrying him through storms of doubt. Now he carried another woman's laughter on his arm. Her chest tightened, but her face did not change. Years of discipline had taught her silence. She inhaled slowly, as steady as the tide. She whispered words only she could hear. The sea will test him. Behind her, the hum of the ship was constant, calm. Outside, Richard laughed at something Jessica said, but his smile looked thin, forced. Angela turned from the window, her uniform firm on her shoulders. The storm was inside her, but her command was clear. The pool deck shimmered under the Florida sun. Water sparkled in turquoise, music pulsed from hidden speakers, and cocktails glistened in sweating glasses. Passengers lounged, soaking in the first hours of paradise. Jessica strutted across the deck in her red dress. Every step demanded attention. She posed near the pool, holding her phone high, pouting into the camera. Laughter followed her like perfume. Richard trailed close behind. He held champagne but gripped the glass too tightly, his knuckles pale. He forced a smile for her photos, but his eyes betrayed unease. The more Jessica twirled, the heavier the silence pressed on him. From a shaded balcony above, Angela stood still, her uniform crisp, her presence hidden among the crew. She watched Richard laugh nervously, watched Jessica perform for strangers. Angela's lips did not move, but her heart ached in quiet waves. This was her ship, her command, and yet the man who once vowed forever danced with betrayal at its center. The music swelled. Passengers cheered. But Angela's silence carried more weight than all their noise combined. Angela sat alone in her captain's quarters. The hum of the ship was steady, but inside her chest silence pressed heavier. On the desk stood a small frame, their wedding photo. She reached out and touched the glass. The white dress, his nervous smile, her own eyes shining with hope. She remembered the words he whispered that day, trembling but sincere. Forever, Angela. No matter what comes, it's us. Now the word echoed like an empty shell. Forever had become fragile. The promise cracked without his notice, but she felt every fracture. She ran her fingers across the image, tracing the outline of his face. The man in the photo had been young, eager, desperate to prove himself. The man on her ship now was hollow, carrying guilt behind forced laughter. Angela let her hand fall. She had carried his dreams, built his world, kept his home alive. Yet, here she was, invisible in his story, watching from the shadows. Her uniform pressed firm on her shoulders, reminding her of who she had become. She whispered softly, not to him, but to herself. Promises may break, but dignity does not. On the pool deck, laughter grew louder. Jessica lifted her phone, holding a glass of champagne high. She adjusted her red dress, tilted her head, and smiled at the camera. Her voice rang out, playful, rehearsed. "Living my best life," she said, adding the caption with a flick of her finger. Richard stood beside her, stiff. He forced his lips into a grin as she pulled him into the frame. Her laughter sparkled as she clinked glasses, turning the camera to catch the glitter of the sea. Inside, Richard's chest tightened. He imagined Angela's quiet hands folding clothes at home, her steady patience. A thought stabbed. What if she saw this? His throat closed. Then relief. Angela never cared for social media. She never posted, never scrolled. He clung to that fact, breathing easier. Jessica tapped share and laughed again. Notifications already poured in, comments flooding with praise and envy. She glowed under the attention, her eyes never leaving the screen. Richard looked away, gripping his glass tighter. He told himself it was nothing. Just a photo, just a moment. But guilt scratched like claws beneath his smile. The ballroom pulsed with music that night. Light spilled across the dance floor as couples swayed to the rhythm. Jessica pulled Richard into the circle, laughing with a boldness that drew every eye. Richard moved with her, his steps careful, his smile stretched thin. The crowd clapped to the beat, charmed by her confidence. She twirled, her dress catching the light, her hair flying as she leaned against him. He tried to laugh, but his chest thudded with unease. Even with music blaring, he felt watched. The weight of unseen eyes pressed down, sharp and unrelenting. Above, on a shadowed balcony, Angela stood. Her hands rested on the railing, her face unreadable. She did not blink. Her uniform gleamed under the dim lights, a silent mark of her authority. She watched as Richard kissed Jessica under the music. She did not flinch, did not move. Only her eyes spoke, steady and unbroken. Richard's laughter faltered for a beat. He sensed something beyond the crowd, something heavy in the air. He brushed it off, forcing his steps to match hers. But the shadow of his wife lingered, silent, unshaken. Later that night, Angela returned to the bridge. The room glowed with the dim light of instruments, steady as the heartbeat of the ship. She stood before the chart table, tracing her finger across the lines of navigation. The sea stretched endless beyond the windows, dark and unyielding. Angela inhaled, steadying herself. Her voice was soft, meant only for the silence. Every voyage has a reckoning. The words hung in the air, weighty, calm, unhurried. She believed them. The ocean carried truths that could not be buried. Waves would always return, and so would consequences. Her hand tightened on the edge of the table. She could feel her pulse in her fingertips, but her face did not change. She had learned discipline, patience, and silence. Behind her, officers worked quietly, respecting the calm she carried. They did not see the storm beneath her uniform. Only Angela knew how much strength it took to keep it hidden. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, whispering again, as if to seal the promise. The sea does not forget, and neither do I. The days moved quickly toward the ship's grand gala. Passengers spoke excitedly about gowns, music, and the mysterious new captain who had yet to appear. Jessica was radiant with anticipation. She paraded through the boutique, flashing a diamond necklace Richard had bought only yesterday. She tilted her chin, letting the jewel catch the light, her laughter carrying through the room. She wanted every glance, every whisper. Richard stood beside her, silent. He carried the weight of her shopping bags, his stomach heavy with unease. Each time she called him darling, the word felt hollow. Far above, in her quarters, Angela prepared differently. She smoothed the crisp lines of her uniform, polished the badge on her chest, and laid out a single sheet of notes. Her speech was simple: safety, trust, dignity. No mention of betrayal, no mention of Richard. Two women prepared for the same night in opposite ways. One craved the sparkle of attention. The other carried silence like armor. The ballroom would glow with the chandeliers soon, and when the curtains lifted, truth would walk on stage. The morning sun lit the ship's cafe. Passengers lingered over fruit and pastries, their voices soft with laughter. At a corner table, Jessica leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "When are you leaving her?" she asked, her tone playful on the surface but edged with demand. Richard froze, a fork halfway to his mouth. "Jessica, I won't stay your secret forever." She twirled her necklace, lips curving, but her eyes were hard. Richard's throat tightened. He stammered about timing, about business complications. His words fell heavy, unconvincing. Jessica rolled her eyes. "You think I'll wait forever? You want me as your wife, Richard, or you want me gone?" He nodded quickly, palms sweating, desperate to buy silence. Around them, passengers continued eating, unaware. Yet not everyone was blind. Near the counter, a steward moved quietly, arranging plates, eyes down but ears sharp. He heard every word, memorized every pause. Later, his report would reach Angela. Richard tried to breathe, but the cafe walls felt closer. Jessica smiled sweetly, satisfied with his discomfort. The table looked ordinary to strangers, but beneath the chatter, a storm had been planted. In her quarters, Angela sat at her desk, the soft hum of the engine steady beneath her feet. She opened a worn journal, its pages filled with years of notes and memories. From between the leaves, she pulled out a folded letter. Richard's handwriting sprawled across the paper, faded now, but still legible. Forever, Angela. No matter the storms, no matter the years, it's always us. She read the lines slowly, tracing the words with her finger. The ink had smudged in places, blurred as though time itself had tried to erase them. What once felt eternal now felt brittle. Her chest tightened, but her face remained calm. She folded the letter carefully, pressing it flat against the journal before sliding it back inside. The act was deliberate, final. Angela no longer needed words on paper to define her worth. She had carried promises long enough. Now she carried command, responsibility, and the quiet strength of truth. She closed the journal and set it aside. The letter remained, but the power it once held was gone. Angela's eyes steadied. She was not bound to his forever anymore. Whispers drifted through the ship like a current. At breakfast tables, in lounges, by the poolside, passengers traded stories about the mysterious new captain. "They say she caught a navigation error before anyone else noticed," one guest murmured. "And she never raises her voice," another added. "Just looks at you and you listen." "Calm, sharp, dignified," someone concluded. Richard passed by, hearing fragments. He tried to appear uninterested, sipping his coffee as Jessica scrolled on her phone, but the words pricked at him. Captain, dignified, respected. Who was this figure everyone admired? The praise lingered in his ears longer than he wanted to admit. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, pretending not to notice. Jessica waved a hand in front of him. "Earth to Richard. Who cares about some captain? You're here with me." He forced a nod, brushing the thought aside, but the whispers clung to him like shadows. The captain was not just a name anymore. She was a presence felt across the ship. Richard's jaw tightened. He told himself it meant nothing. Yet curiosity gnawed at him, restless, unshakable. Days passed, but Richard's unease only deepened. Every time a crew member passed, nodding politely, he felt a strange twist in his chest. The crisp uniforms, the respectful salutes, each one reminded him of authority he could not touch. Jessica laughed at his tension. "Relax, nobody cares. You act like the crew is watching you." She sipped her drink, sunglasses covering her eyes. "They don't know you. They don't care about your boring little company back in Houston." Richard tried to laugh with her, but the sound rang hollow. Each salute he saw from crew to someone unseen unsettled him further. Respect flowed toward the captain, toward a leader he had never met. At night, he lay awake, thinking of Angela. The thought came uninvited, her steady eyes, her quiet patience. He pushed it away, but it returned again, sharper. Jessica stretched beside him, oblivious, lost in her own reflection. Richard stared at the ceiling, his chest heavy. The ship sailed smoothly across calm waters, but inside him the waves grew restless. On the bridge, Angela stood before the vast windows, the sea stretching dark and endless. The ship hummed beneath her feet, steady, loyal. Her officers moved quietly, trusting her calm. She clasped her hands behind her back, eyes fixed on the horizon. To them, she was composed, unreadable. Inside, her thoughts carried weight. "Let him believe he is free," she whispered softly, a breath carried away by the hum of machines. "Truth will anchor him." Her reflection in the glass showed a woman transformed. No longer the quiet wife waiting in shadows, no longer the one folding clothes while nights grew long. Now she wore command on her shoulders, dignity pressed into every line of her uniform. The silence was her strength. She did not need anger. She did not need revenge. Time and tide would reveal everything. Behind her, the officers reported routine checks. Angela nodded, her voice calm. She held the wheel not only of the ship, but of her fate, and soon Richard would see. The cafe was quieter than usual, the soft clink of silverware filling the air. Richard sat with Jessica, his coffee cooling untouched. Jessica leaned closer, her voice low but sharp. "When are you leaving her?" The words landed heavy. Richard's chest tightened. He tried to laugh it off, but his smile cracked. "It's complicated. Business, timing, paperwork." Jessica's eyes narrowed. "Excuses. That's all I hear. You think I'll sit in the shadows forever? I want more. I deserve more." She tapped her diamond necklace, her tone rising. "I want to be Mrs. Coleman, and I won't wait forever." Richard's fork slipped against the plate. His throat closed. He muttered promises he could not shape into truth. Sweat dampened his collar. Jessica leaned back, satisfied, sipping her juice as though the storm had not happened. Nearby, a steward cleared a table. His head bowed, his hands steady, but his ears caught every word. He memorized the sharpness, the demands, the weaknesses in Richard's voice. Later, he would bring the account to Angela. Richard's hands shook as he reached for his cup. The cafe sounded louder now, every laugh like an echo of judgment. In her quarters, Angela stood before the mirror. The uniform fit her shoulders with quiet strength. White fabric pressed crisp against her frame, the badge gleaming at her chest. Her reflection stared back, a woman no longer hidden. She studied the lines of her face, stronger now, steadier. The years of sacrifice were etched there, but so was the power of what she had become. "You are captain now," she whispered, her voice even. Not just a forgotten wife. She let the words hang in the still air. The woman in the glass was not the same one who had once waited at home, folding laundry, swallowing silence. This woman commanded oceans. This woman was seen, respected, saluted. Angela straightened her cap, lifting it with careful precision. Every motion carried dignity. She smoothed the sleeves, tightened the buttons, adjusted her shoulders. For a moment she looked away to the photo on her desk. The past still hurt, but it no longer defined her. She returned her gaze to the mirror, steady and calm. The sea outside whispered against the hull, reminding her of its promise. She was ready to face what was coming. The ballroom glowed with chandeliers, gold spilling across marble floors. Passengers arrived in gowns and tuxedos, their laughter rising above the music of a live quartet. Waiters drifted with trays of wine, glasses clinking like bells. Jessica sparkled among them. Her diamond necklace caught every beam of light. Her dress clung in the right places, and her phone was raised high. She filmed herself twirling, posting to her followers, adding captions of luxury. Her laugh carried, bold and bright. Richard stood beside her, adjusting his tie again and again. Sweat gathered at his temples. Every face in the crowd looked harmless, yet he felt eyes everywhere. His hand trembled when he lifted his glass. "Relax," Jessica teased, pulling him into frame for another video. "This is our night." But Richard's smile was thin. His chest burned with dread, though he could not explain why. Something pressed against him, heavier with every passing minute. The crowd buzzed louder. Excitement spread like fire. Everyone waited for one thing, the formal introduction of the captain. Richard's pulse raced. He felt the walls close in, as though judgment itself was about to step through the doors. The music softened, replaced by the clear voice of the announcer. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your captain." Applause thundered through the hall. Richard clapped slowly, his palms damp. Jessica lifted her phone, recording every moment with a grin. The curtains shifted. Footsteps echoed on the polished floor. A silhouette appeared under the lights, tall, composed. Hurried. Richard blinked. His breath caught. The figure stepped forward, the spotlight revealing her face. Angela. His wife. Time shattered. The applause roared around him, but he heard only the pounding of his own blood. His jaw dropped, his hands froze mid-clap. Jessica gasped, lowering her phone, her eyes darting from Angela to Richard. Angela's uniform gleamed. Her presence filled the room. She stood steady, smiling politely to the passengers, thanking them with calm grace. She did not look at him, not once. Richard's chest collapsed inward. His world cracked in silence. Jessica's grip on his arm tightened, nails digging into his skin. The hall cheered, unaware of the storm at one table. For Richard, the gala was no celebration. It was a reckoning. Angela stepped to the microphone. Her voice carried with calm authority, smooth and steady. "It is my honor to serve as captain on this voyage. Safety, dignity, and trust will guide every decision aboard this vessel." Applause swelled, warm and admiring. Passengers leaned closer, listening with respect. Crew members straightened with pride. Her words moved through the hall like steady waves, strong yet gentle. She spoke of the sea, of journeys, of leadership. She thanked her officers for their loyalty. She reminded everyone that a ship moved forward only when guided by trust. Not once did her eyes drift toward Richard. Not once did her tone falter. She addressed the crowd, not the man who had betrayed her. Richard sat low in his chair, sweat trickling down his back. Every word pierced deeper, though they were not meant for him. Silence burned more than accusation ever could. Jessica folded her arms, her face tight with fury. Her diamond glittered under the light, but her triumph had shattered. Angela bowed slightly, her smile composed. The hall erupted again in applause. She had not raised her voice, yet her presence drowned out every other sound. The cabin door slammed behind them. Jessica's heels clicked hard against the floor before she tore one off and hurled it across the room. The shoe struck the wall with a sharp crack. "You lied to me!" she screamed. "You let me stand there like a fool while your wife, commanded the entire ship." Richard sat on the edge of the bed, his tie loosened, his face pale. Words formed on his lips but never escaped. He lowered his eyes, unable to meet her glare. Jessica paced like a storm, her red dress trailing behind her. "You promised me everything. You promised me a future. Instead, you gave me humiliation." She spat the last word as if it burned her mouth. Richard pressed his hands to his face. For the first time, the man who once ruled boardrooms felt small, powerless. He could not command Jessica's rage, could not command his own shame. Jessica shoved clothes into her bag, her fury snapping with each motion. "You're weak, Richard. I don't waste myself on weak men." The door slammed again. Silence swallowed him whole. He sat there, hollow, hearing only the faint pulse of the sea outside. The night air was sharp as Richard stepped onto the deck. Stars scattered above him, glittering cold against the black sky. The ocean stretched wide, endless, indifferent. He leaned against the railing, his hands gripping the metal until his knuckles whitened. The wind carried the salt of the sea, stinging his throat. He whispered a single name, broken, desperate. "Angela." The sound vanished into the waves, devoured by the vastness. No echo returned, only silence. He remembered her quiet laugh when he came home late, her steady hands folding his shirts, her patience that never wavered. He had traded all of it for a shallow thrill, for a sparkle that now cut him like glass. The ship hummed beneath him, steady, loyal, yet he felt adrift. The applause from the gala still rang in his mind, but louder was Angela's silence. She had not confronted him. She had not even looked his way. She had erased him without a word. Richard bowed his head, his chest hollow. The man who once believed he controlled his world now stood alone, a shadow against the sea. And the sea did not care. Morning broke across the horizon, painting the sea in gold. Angela stood on the bridge, her hands steady on the wheel. The glass stretched before her, the sun rising over calm waters. Her officers moved with quiet respect, each one watching her with trust. They admired her composure, her certainty. Every command she gave was measured, her voice calm yet unshakable. She glanced toward the horizon, her eyes reflecting the light. The pain of betrayal was still there, but it no longer defined her. The ocean had become her anchor, and the dawn had become her promise. Behind her, the crew worked diligently, their loyalty clear. They did not see a forgotten wife. They saw their captain. Strong, steady, unstoppable. Angela breathed deeply, letting the salt air fill her chest. For the first time in years, she felt whole. The wheel beneath her hands was not just steering a ship, it was steering her life. The sun rose higher, the sea shimmering with endless possibility. Angela's lips curved, faint but certain. The past was behind her. Ahead was light. The bridge was quiet, the only sound the low hum of the engines. Angela stood by the wide window, watching the sea stretch into eternity. The water glittered under the morning sun, as if the world itself offered renewal. She whispered softly, her words carried away by the tide. "The sea doesn't lie." Her eyes did not search for Richard anymore. His figure no longer haunted her thoughts. What mattered was the horizon, the path ahead, and the strength she had claimed. She touched the badge on her chest, feeling its weight. It was not just a symbol of rank. It was proof of every hidden hour, every quiet sacrifice, every piece of herself that had once been overlooked. The memories of his betrayal still hurt, but the hurt no longer chained her. She was free. Angela turned from the glass, her steps firm as she moved across the bridge. The ship moved forward, and so did she. The sea carried her future. Richard belonged to the shadows she had left behind. Angela never raised her voice. She never sought revenge. She let silence speak, and in that silence she found her power. The strongest thing a woman can do is not to break down, not to shout, but to stand tall and claim her destiny. Angela had been betrayed by money, by ambition, by a man who forgot his vows. But she had not been broken. She chose dignity. She chose strength. She chose herself. The sea did not lie. It revealed what was hidden. It exposed what was false. And it carried forward the one truth Angela had always held, that no one defines a woman's worth but herself. So ask yourself, if you were her, would you walk away in silence or would you confront the storm? Share your thoughts below. And if Angela's story touched something inside you, remember to subscribe. Stay with us for more stories that stir the heart. Remind us of our strength and give voice to the journeys we all face. Because sometimes the most powerful endings are not shouted. They are chosen in silence.